Okay, well, hi everyone. Today we have Dr. Benjamin Alter on the Students Against Mandates podcast. You might know Dr. Alter and his wife Susanna Alter from the Alter Your Health podcast. They have been fantastic sources of information about not only physical health but also spiritual health. We've loved the way that Dr. Alter has approached the discussion, pretty sensitive discussion around COVID-19. He's come at it from a way that's based around information and informing one another and really has helped to bridge a divide in a sense that has been otherwise a pretty toxic area. And I think Benjamin approached it with a lot of nuance and was very thoughtful in his approach to it. So we're so excited to have him on today to learn a little bit about where we're at societally from a health standpoint. And so, Dr. Benjamin Alter, welcome. Thank you for taking the time.
Thank you, and thanks for the kind words. I'm really flattered. I feel like, I was really passionate in the early days of the, quote unquote pandemic, just because it was hitting quote close to home. And to be honest, I feel like my passion or enthusiasm has kind of dwindled. I've become, quite frankly, a little bit more jaded and to the sense of, oh, does my voice really matter? What I have to say or think and share, does that really matter? Just because the massive amount of information that I'm quote unquote up against is daunting. But so thank you for that encouragement and that inspiration to maybe continue sharing.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it was funny. I was thinking of our own group, and sometimes we've dealing with censorship, we haven't been able to reach the numbers of people we necessarily wanted to in all circumstances. But I early on in the process, I was looking for inspiration too, and so it's funny the way inspiration works. Sometimes it's just from one person to another, and I was listening to your podcast and how amazing you and both your wife's work has been, and seeing that not always is in the millions of views, but rather, I'm thinking he really affected me with going through university at a time where, there was a lot of approach to health was very around everything being sterile. And so learning about proper nutrition at the time when, often you're young and you've got a lot of things going on was so beneficial for myself. So yes, it gave me a lot of inspiration thinking, well, our group may not reach those numbers, but if we can just even influence one person or help somebody out through a tough time, it makes it all worthwhile. So really
100%.
cool. So Dr. Alter, it's been an interesting kind of past few years, but I wanted to even jump back a little bit earlier than that. It seems like we've been through some really interesting, at least a societal kind of interest in health, maybe a little bit more so in the past decade or so than it's been for a while, to say the least. So interest in different diets, different fads have come into play here. And then just over the past 3 years, it seemed like this really amazing opportunity to start implementing some of those great dieting practices was, great opportunity dealing with COVID-19 and getting people healthy and getting people fit and active. And it seemed like a bit of a missed opportunity. But nonetheless, I spoke to many people who were still very, very curious about nutrition and health and just didn't know much about it, how to get into it, and even sad to say, sometimes really even the benefits of it in the long-term run. So I know it sounds a little bit basic, but perhaps you could just walk us through your background, what it first attracted you to naturopathic medicine, and what is health to you?
Yeah. Well, I've known that I've wanted to be a doctor forever, for as long as I can remember, that is. And to be honest, I didn't even know that the world of naturopathic or alternative medicine really existed. I grew up in Phoenix, Arizona, went to University of Arizona, and University of Arizona is a big hub of traditional conventional medicine. Actually, also alternative and naturopathic medicine, but I didn't know it at the time. But anyways, I was kind of just on the conventional medical path. And as the universe does, it intervened in a number of forceful ways to knock me, quote unquote, off of course into the authentic course of more natural health. And, there's all these terms, I have a hard time even saying like natural because that has been like kind of corrupted that term. Like there are so, you see natural this and that on so many products that are so far from natural. And same with holistic and yada yada. But in any event, yeah, I just kind of followed the universal messages and cues and people guiding me. And next thing I know, I was in school studying naturopathic medicine. That was back in about 2012. In 2012, I decided to, go into this program, and here we are today.
Amazing, amazing. And so, in interesting times, so you're just to fill me in there, you're working with your wife, and you've got your own practice running. You're doing your podcast, and this is early kind of 2020. Is that when you had started there, Ben, if I'm not mistaken?
I finished school in 2017.
Okay.
Actually worked for a year in kind of a more traditional clinical setting, traditional naturopathic clinical setting in the San Francisco Bay Area. And I knew that I wanted to make a broader impact, and I knew
Mhm.
that my mission was not going to be just one-on-one consultations around health and nutrition and lifestyle, even though that's super important and a lot of people do need that.
Mhm.
But I was called to just a more broad education, and that, of course, inspired the podcast. And we've got courses and programs that we have through Alter Health, as well as Dr. Susanna does most of the one-on-one consultations. But yeah, to cut to the chase, there's just like so much information that is broadly applicable to all of humanity. And of course, every individual needs an individualized approach. But that being said, if we just cover the foundations of health,
Mhm.
that takes us a real long way. And I think a lot of people just directly get lost in the weeds without really,
Mm.
just covering the basics. And a lot of people just kind of think about, oh, food and water and air. Like,
Yes.
you know, I've, I know how to do that. I know how to eat. I
Mhm.
know how to breathe. I know how to sleep. I know how to move. But most people actually don't. Or maybe
Yeah.
some people do know how to do that, but they're not actually applying it in a way that's effective in their lives and
Mm.
sustainable in their lives.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what a lot of our work is at Alter Health.
So cool. And I mean, you use a great term there, broad, because I just do want to. We have so many students who listen, and it's really interesting for students to hear different career paths. It gets people curious as we have different hosts on and they guests on, pardon me, and they share their background. You also have a degree, as does your wife, in spiritual psychology. Am I correct about that?
Yeah, I
Okay.
went to a master's program in spiritual psychology before starting medical school, and that's definitely influenced everything in my life. Absolutely.
So cool. So cool. So it gives you quite a broad understanding of things that from a multitude of levels, kind of almost the body working in a total unison approach that leads us to kind of COVID coming along there. And perhaps you could just fill us in from a health-based perspective, what some of maybe your initial concerns were with the approach to managing COVID, to say the least. There were some initial things that stood out to you.
Yeah, I mean, I love sharing this story from like the first days, which what was just over 4 years ago. I'll
Mhm.
never forget because it was actually my wife's birthday. Susanna's birthday is March 16th, and we were had a trip planned for her birthday 4 years ago, and all that, went to the wayside. But I remember, we. I have a hard time admitting this, but I used to get my news, quote unquote news, through late night shows like Stephen Colbert. And it just as for like more comedy and entertainment. And I remember vividly when these late night shows, and I would just like kind of watch clips on YouTube and stuff. I'm totally, not a news consumer, but more entertainment. But anyways, I would watch these clips, and I remember all of a sudden all these late night shows were coming on very serious. And everyone probably remembers the novel virus. There's a novel virus, a novel
Yes.
pathogen, novel pathogen. And my red flag went immediately up because I remember learning in immunology that any pathogen that
Pathogen
causes disease is
is a
novel
novel. Yes.
because we've
Yeah.
got an immune system that has a memory that when we're exposed to anything, and this is just the conventional understanding of immunity. When we're
Mhm.
exposed to something, our immune system has a memory so that we mount an immediate immune response and don't get quote unquote sick from the said pathogen. So it's only novel pathogens that ever make us quote unquote
Mhm.
sick to begin with. So it just was like, yeah, every year we've got novel pathogens. That's what, and again, this is conventional medical model. That's what caused the cold and flu season is these novel pathogens that circulate, yada, yada. So I'm like, okay. So, and then it was just like, you know, nothing was making sense at all. So I never even took the slightest sip on the Kool-Aid
Wow.
for a minute personally with the whole narrative. And that being said, like I was sensitive to people who were in fear and afraid of things. But I think what is so empowering, and this is really reflective through our work at Alter Health, is really helping people understand how the body works.
Mhm.
Because when we have that understanding of how the body works, then we know that we're capable of being healthy in the
Mhm.
face of anything. And that's, of course, when we're nourishing ourselves holistically the way that we're designed to. So I never had an ounce of fear or worry about anything. And my intention has always been to support people in eliminating whatever fear that they do have, because we also know that fear does
Mhm.
decrease our defense system and overall health. So I don't even remember what your question is, but here I am,
I think you
wandering
answered.
off.
No, I
Yeah.
think you answered it really well because it's actually we often have discussions based upon the reaction to the virus, and that often flows into the discussion around vaccines. But I mean, I studied pre-law is in my focus, and in law you understand that of course the reaction can only be justified if there was first an action to have a reaction to. So which is really curious because we often don't go very back to the discussion about what was going on at the beginning and things like a novel, and how many people novel virus, how common that is, and of course, a large thing is we see understand the PCR testing too, which is often lost in the discussion that the PCR testing, if you test every single person, it's going to have a large number of cases. And so a little bit concern around that. But also, I think right back to the early discussion around that departure away from, as you said, your basics of health. So getting into fear-based scenarios, the impact that that has on health. What were some of the major things you saw that respective in regards to um, that movement away from our natural kind of way our body should be acting, we should be treating our body in respect to the fear around the COVID-19.
Well, of course, there was the immediate push to isolate and
Mhm.
stay inside. And isolation and staying indoors are both completely contrary to health, you know,
Mhm.
um, to true health. And I think you maybe even asked a question like 10 minutes ago, like, what is health?
Yes.
And health is not the absence of disease, right? Health is
Mhm.
so much more than just the absence of being sick and the absence of having symptoms. And so if we're, staying inside and isolating, we don't have access to our fullest potential in any way, shape, or form. So yeah, I forget your question again, but like what was the main.
Yeah, what ways did people depart from how they really should be treating their body and how they should be thinking about, colds and viruses in respect to yeah, like you say, isolation, fear, and lockdown. Was there some things as a naturopath you went, whoa, guys, we
Yeah,
should really be doing this certain way here. This is kind of critical for our health. And actually, we're seeing most people react in this
yeah.
way. Was it just curious as to the finite ways in which people were doing that.
Yeah, I mean, again, the big things were the isolation and staying indoors.
Hmm.
Being outside in nature and being with people is actually the best way to stay healthy.
Yes.
Like diet and lifestyle aside, just being outside
Hmm.
and being amongst friends and family and community is the best way to stay healthy. And a lot of people are like, really, like, I don't know, all these germs and things can be spread. And first of all, without going on the total off the rails and in a different direction, the germ theory is just a theory. It has actually never been fully proven to the fullest extent in a truly scientific basis amongst any germ. But even if germs did exist and cause disease directly, we know that a healthy ecosystem is far more important than the absence of a germ. And that's evident anywhere you look outside in nature. If you look and, look in out the window and see your trees living and thriving and your bushes and your flowers. If you took that tree and stuck it in a bubble, it would
Mm,
die, you know? If
yes.
you took any life form and stuck it in a bubble and cut off all connections with other life forms in which with which we coexist, everything would die.
Mhm,
Slowly but surely, that's always the case. And it's the same with humanity. And
mhm,
sometimes that death happens first in this kind of emotional, spiritual depression sort of way, feeling cut
mhm,
off and disconnected. But for sure, that's also reflected physically with a, suppressed vitality, immune function, and everything else.
mhm.
So
Absolutely. So would there be a way, I mean, what would you have done, like solution based? I mean, say there was a virus that one really did need to be very cautious of, or there was a large risk associated with said virus. How would one actually, because now the curious discussion, I think, for my generation is solution based for the future. Well, if we do occur something in the future, do we do lockdowns again? What could be actually a better solution? As you say, I mean, getting outdoors, keeping active. I know here in British Columbia, we shut down all the provincial parks. So, in relation to what you just said, not a good idea. But is there a way that you would suggest one deal with something like that? I mean, is there a solution in some sense?
yeah, for sure, just doing the common sense things. And I think everyone already knows what those things are, when it comes to staying, getting sunshine, staying active, staying connected, having good conversations, connecting with friends, drinking fresh water,
Mm,
eating fresh food. And then, uh, those are the foundations of health. And I think that, like we said, I think before we started recording, a lot of people just totally skip all that and jumped to, oh, like what kind of supplements can I take?
yeah.
And it's like for sure, there are different sorts of supplements and nutrients that are studied in isolation to help, overall defense and against various things. But that is secondary. And
Mm,
supplements are called supplements because they supplement
mm,
something, and that
mhm,
is our
mhm,
life, the way that we should be living. But that being said, of course, like we need to undergo and always pursue scientific study and understanding. And that was never done with COVID-19, right? It was
mm,
never like, all right, let's look at and see what sort of nutrients are effective in providing, health and immunity against, this disease.
mhm.
Um, and I'm kind of cringing at myself when I when I even say that, because personally my understanding of health is, like I already said, health is not the absence of disease. And getting, quote unquote, getting sick is actually very
Mhm,
healthy. It's a way that our body adapts and evolves and detoxifies. So we want to support our bodies in getting sick healthfully
mhm,
and moving through dis-ease with ease, so that we can emerge from the other side actually more vital and robust
mhm,
than we were before. That's kind of the intention of nature and evolution,
mhm,
is to evolve, is to, coexist with these so-called pathogens, most of which are not true pathogens, but opportunistic organisms that might trigger some detoxification reaction, and then support that process in
mhm.
a healthy sort of way by, staying hydrated, nourished, and, sweating, and
Yeah.
these sorts of kind of, again, common sense things.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a big shift from, I mean, I think in that sense, even the understanding of these words, disease, it's dis-ease, right? So you break down the simple things that we've often overlooked. I think in society today, we don't really understand the actual meaning of these things, and of course, that the supplementation is a secondary process in respect to health. First was is treating our body well, eating the proper food, and of course, to having healthy content, which is a really interesting thing for content for yourself. I mean, this is something that I think people are really fascinated with. Is it does flow into that unison kind of bodily health and mental health, all as one. Would someone, I mean, is just wondering for your suggestion or your advice, completely isolate themselves from any negative social media content too? Does one back away, or is there a healthy approach to listening to news as well?
That's a really good question and a great topic to explore, I think, and something that's relevant to pretty much all of us, right?
Mhm.
because I think that a lot of people do tend to think like, oh, this is fear-based and I don't want to be exposed to anything fear-based.
Mhm.
And or, there's and the fact of the matter is, well, that's impossible. And I think that similarly, we should be exposed to everything and anything to the best
Mhm.
of your ability to, and that kind of is an individual thing depending on how robust you're feeling moment to moment. And I think a lot of people live in this misunderstanding that their outside news and reality and circumstances actually causes them to feel
Mhm.
stress or
Mhm.
anxiousness or whatever else. And it's
Mhm.
actually just our perception of the
Mhm.
outside circumstances that causes us to feel different things. So I think that controlling your narrative and controlling what you're exposed to, it's like, yeah, you can try to do that. But if you're doing that with the intention or attempt to feel more peace, it's a futile cycle. It's a lost cause because that's not where peace comes from. And so personally, I love being exposed to all sorts of crazy stuff. And usually Susanna, my wife, has to like reel me in and because I feel like she tends to be more impressionable and like just kind of more sensitive to these kind of outer circumstances and stressors, whereas me, like I like to be exposed to things and um and it's like, yeah, I'm sure gonna have reactions and feelings to them, but it like strengthens me.
Yeah.
It feels good to rebalance and recalibrate from going off the deep end and going down some rabbit hole in various directions.
Yes.
So
Absolutely.
yeah, long story short, I think that we should be exposed to anything and everything, as much as we're capable of, and as much as our bandwidth is able to deal with. And we have kind of, in doing so, we also have that responsibility to counter that and balance that by
Mhm.
finding quietness and stillness and, doing practices that might look like meditation or, solitude. Because for sure, if we're just exposed to media and videos and TikTok and Instagram and whatever all day long, our nervous system is just simply not cut out for that. So when we're talking from more of a neuroscience physiologic standpoint, we need to balance things. So you know, I think you could kind of go down, have this conversation from more of an emotional, spiritual perspective, as well as a physiologic
Mhm.
neuroscience perspective.
Yes, very cool. Yeah, well, it's an interesting thing because, like you say, some people simply it is more challenging to be in the space. It is seemingly far more negative. But I like what you say as well because it's something I've had to implement the practice of the way of thinking at least is that the negativity is the perception of it being negative, right? It's at the end of the day, we see something, believe it to be negative. Well, really, we're allowing that to become a negative thought in our head there. But perhaps there is a way too of seeing this kind of large social transitions we've been through in the past couple of years as part of a larger story, perhaps part of a more of a human historical story. Do you
Right.
find that there's a way that's of thinking of these large kind of social transitions that can feel quite intense as we go through them is actually part of a more digestible kind of way of viewing them?
Yeah, I think you're bringing a lot of great wisdom to the point. And because the fact of the matter is that, if you look at any story, there's just that classic hero's journey, right? Where we all row under pressure and we all require, adversity and obstacle to, learn things. So I think that that's an overall healthy perspective to approach life is like, oh, I'm here to learn. I'm not here to just have fun. I'm here to like get the
Love
most out of it. And hopefully, in doing so, that also correlates with having fun and, being loving and joyful and everything like that. But of course, we live in this dualistic reality, right? So it's the dark that is going to force us to like find more access to our innate light,
it.
right? Um, so yeah, that's kind of the perspective I attempt to live life from to the best of my ability. And I think in general, It's obviously easier said than done, when you're in the midst of that kind of darkness and just, it's like totally stressed, totally overwhelmed. There's no being talked out of that. I think sometimes a companion or a friend, it's like they want to help people feel less pain and suffering and less darkness. But sometimes an individual needs to go through that kind
Mm,
of dark night of the soul or whatever it
mm,
is called, to kind of like as part of that,
yeah.
journey.
Mhm,
So it's, and as I'm, sharing this, it's like so kind of reflective and correlating with physical health as well. It's like we need to be stressed. We need to be exposed again to different sorts of toxins or germs or whatever else that strengthen us and
mhm,
allow us to kind of build more resilience and evolve and adapt. And I was also just talking with a friend yesterday who's really an expert in permaculture and landscaping and
mhm,
plants and stuff. And he was
mhm,
talking about how, when you're planting a tree, you don't want to just create this perfect bubble of perfect soil for this tree to grow in this kind of in this environment. You want to mix the natural environment and the natural soil with the perfect soil so that it has just the right amount of stress and nutrient depletion so that it can adapt to the environment in which it's planted. So yeah, I think there's just this universal truth that we need adversity in order to be our best, highest self. So we can welcome that.
yeah, so cool. Yeah, it's oftentimes, I mean, for myself, I've been, one can go through physical ailments or temporary physical ailments, and you feel that there's a growth period afterwards, or you learn to be more conscientious of this part of your body or have a new respect for it. Oftentimes, feel with one's spiritual or psychological health. When we go through a really dark time, we often don't feel that it actually is improving. You just feel like you're kind of in a downward spiral. But also afterwards, I mean, coming out from COVID, you do feel like, wow, you've been through something kind of amazing. You're able to get through, and you have a stronger mental attitude now. Is that something that you feel has occurred for yourself too, and helped with your work during the time when you were making some of your videos? You seem to be coming at it from such a calm, centered place. I mean, that's certainly what resonated with me, that feeling at least. But was that always the case? Was it a very challenging time for you running a practice as well, speaking out, and then how did this improve you as a person?
Yeah, it was a challenging time, mainly because um, I've always kind of struggled with speaking up and sharing my voice and saying what's on my mind. So when the COVID stuff came around, it was almost like going to the gym or going to a boot camp because it
Mhm,
became that much harder to share what was on my mind because there was just the weight of the collective narrative and society and like friends and family. And yes, I lost friends and yes, family relationships. Thankfully, none were lost, but lots were very severely strained for years. Fortunately, like, we learn from that. We learn like, okay, we just don't talk about these kind of things.
mhm,
So yeah, it was definitely a difficult time. And that being said, back to the prior topic of just like finding the opportunities and the obstacles,
mhm,
I did obviously connect with some incredible new people that I
mhm,
wouldn't have otherwise. And I think that I learned, how to articulate myself and, breach sensitive topics in a calm and grounded sort of way and find middle ground and come together because the fact is I've always been this kind of utopian optimist, and I think that the quote unquote pandemic really kind of woke me up to reality. I was kind of living in a little bit of la la land.
mhm,
So I think that I think I already mentioned, I kind of got sort of jaded for a little bit and I kind of was in a little darkness. And now, yeah, I'm, emerging like I have been emerging. It's not like happening today, but it's like I have been emerging from this kind of more grounded, understanding, rational sense of like how the world really is and not in some la la land. And from that, and it's only from that place where you can actually create sustainable, real solutions for the future, right? You can't create solutions from an ungrounded la la land.
Mm-hmm,
Yeah.
hmm.
So,
And just to clarify, because I think you make such a fantastic point, and it's one that I would be completely remiss if I didn't ask on again. Um, from being from a grounded position there, and two, and I like that you mentioned that having a utopic kind of perspective. Oftentimes, that word was really kind of mixed around and was sometimes a challenge for people to grasp, and sometimes was convoluted with a lot of different approaches and theories. But one where I would assume from your perspective, it's one where it's a peaceful kind of society, um, and being in that state, did you notice that your approach, perhaps maybe from when you were a little bit, could be jaded in the sense that relationships weren't able to be mended or be able to be occurring as in a healthy environment as you would have liked, in respect to on the other side being in a grounded position and perhaps they were being able to be mended and solved. Did you find that there would be a major difference between the two in respect to relationships going through challenging times?
yeah, well, I guess when I'm going through a challenging time, I tend to be a little bit more self-centered. I think that's, I'm
Yeah.
just like worried, I'm just consumed in my own thoughts and reality. So there's not as much as of a willingness or openness to reach out and connect and hear and listen. It's more of kind of that self-centeredness, which is never really healthy. It's
Mm-hmm.
important to
Hmm.
be mindful of what's going on in one's own reality, but only to an extent, right?
Hmm.
Because we've got to make room for those connections and relationships. So yeah, I don't know if I'm answering your question, but when I'm feeling stressed or overwhelmed in any capacity, that's where all that is just kind of self-absorbed thoughts. And the of course the ironic thing is that making space and room to connect is the antidote or remedy to stress and overwhelm, having those conversations. But but that first kind of cracking to open up and reach out or let in is so difficult to do. At least
Hmm.
that's my experience. So again, I don't know if I'm really speaking to
No,
your question, but
no, you are. It was simple. It was just kind of a maybe seen a simple question, but the answer to is one that I think is so based in that solution approach, where we're often, not speaking enough about. I find about mending of relationships and keeping those doors open. Right, we still got a society to live in the future, and it's so great to still have dialogue, still have discussions, although it's not easy, and it just comes out of what standpoint we want to, what place we want to come from to have those discussions too. So I appreciate you going over that, and I think you answered it really quite eloquently there. Um, for the future, and I would be totally again remiss if I didn't ask really quickly. I'm looking at my notepad here. Just again, we've had such a great conversation up to this point, but just back to the beginning for COVID there, something I really wanted to touch on, and I had asked around. I said, well, having Dr. Ben Alter on to some of my friends, and they said you have to ask him about natural immunity too. What role does this play? Because it was something that seemed to be, again, very dismissed quickly on early on in COVID about natural immunity having no wasn't going to work. What would be your standpoint with that natural immunity at the early time in COVID there?
yeah. Well, I first want to approach this with the preface of there's kind of the conventional understanding of the immune system, and then there's kind of the alternative understanding of the immune system. And I was trained, and all doctors, naturopathic or otherwise, are trained in the conventional understanding of the immune system. That includes, your B cells and your T cells and your memory cells and your natural killer cells and your white blood cells, all these kind of things that are all these little pieces of your quote unquote immune system.
Mhm.
And then there's this alternative branch of the immune system that I'm by no means an expert in, but I'm curious about. And that's the whole idea that viruses don't exist. Or if they do exist, they certainly don't cause disease.
Mhm.
So I just want to put that out there that there's these two worlds of understanding that actually exist. And there's from my understanding, a lot of evidence to support the fact that viruses don't really exist in the way that we are taught in the conventional world of understanding. And if they do exist, they certainly don't directly cause disease.
Mhm.
So that being said, I want to go back to the conventional understanding of the immune system, because that's the world in which, I don't know, 90+% of people live. For sure, the whole medical system and establishment lives in the conventional understanding of the immune system. So within that conventional understanding, our immune system is designed to defend against pathogens. If pathogens can be viruses, bacteria, parasites, or even toxins can be defined as kind of pathogens because they mount an immune response. So in any event, our immune system has kind of the innate immunity that mounts this immune defense against this novel pathogen once again. And that's what causes symptoms. The symptoms that our body expresses, whether it's a fever or, runny nose or diarrhea or vomiting or anything else, those symptoms are a byproduct of our immune system being active. So those symptoms are actually healthy.
Mhm.
They're a sign of a healthy immune response. And of course, the conventional, worldview of medicine is, if you have a fever, you want to take an antipyretic or a fever lowering medication. If you have nausea or vomiting, you want to take an anti-vomiting medication. If you have, you know, a cough, you want to take
Mhm.
a cough suppressant. But that is suppressing and blocking what our body's trying to do. So that's from a naturopathic, holistic, conventional, or functional medicine perspective. That's not what we want to do. We want to support the body in mounting a healthy immune response.
Mhm.
So that's kind of the overall. That's what the immune
Yes.
system is doing, and that's what we want to encourage the body in doing. And your question is like, the what about the
Yeah,
say it again?
for COVID, when they said that natural immunity would not be a solution whatsoever, you would need a
Yeah.
medical intervention for it instead. Your
Right.
thoughts
So,
on that aspect?
so yeah, natural immunity, what they meant by that is really the memory immunity.
Mm.
So the immune system has this innate immune response, and that has this memory immune response that's T cells and B cells, and it's B cell mediated. And we've got these memory cells. And again, this is just within the conventional understanding of the immune system, what we're taught in conventional medical school and naturopathic medical school and so on. We've got this memory in our immune system. So whenever we're exposed to, if we're exposed to COVID-19 and then we get sick, and then we're exposed to COVID-19 again, the same genetic strain and variant of that virus, then we won't get sick again, and we won't get symptoms again, because we've got this memory, this immunity that immediately sees that virus within our body and just eliminates
Mhm.
it right off the bat. So whenever someone gets sick, and again, I have got to reiterate, this is in the conventional understanding of the immune system. Whenever someone gets sick with the quote unquote same virus twice,
Mhm.
they don't. That's just a flat out lie. That's within the conventional paradigm of the immune system. That doesn't happen. If someone gets sick twice from the same disease, they're getting sick from different strains of that bug, of that virus or bacteria or microorganism. So we always have natural immunity. And by that again, I'm talking about memory immune function, those memory B cells. So we have memory B cells to, COVID-19. We've got memory B cells to the rhinovirus, to, HIV, any virus that causes symptoms, we've got memory immunity to. And that is another word for that, is kind of that natural immunity. So by definition, there's never, if we've ever been exposed to something that's disease causing, there's never a rational reason to be vaccinated or to take some sort of
Yeah.
take some sort of medication or product to create immunity against that thing, because we already have immunity against that thing. And that's the case for all life. That's how the immune system works, again, within that conventional understanding and worldview of the immune system. So
Very
So,
cool.
so yeah, and that's and just another thing that just doesn't add up. And the thing is, it doesn't add up to any doctor who has been trained in the immune system. This
Mm,
isn't like immune system, high level study. This is immunity 101,
yes.
and probably, high school biology as well. I don't remember that. I didn't pay attention, but this is probably the level of immune system that you would learn in high school or for sure undergrad. And so whenever we're exposed to something, we have that memory immunity. So there's never a rational reason to be immunized, quote unquote, against something that we've already naturally been immunized to by nature of exposure.
Yes. Well, that must have been too for yourself, and thank you for that answer. That was very encompassing of the question there. But it must have been very frustrating for yourself as well. Not, I mean, were you talking to other naturopaths at the time and wondering, or other doctors you know or went to school with, and going, what is going on? This seems a little bit strange. Just because I know in BC here at least, it was the first thing they really attacked and cut down were the naturopathic doctors. That you don't want to listen to these people. Almost a concerted effort, and then really we need to jump any discussion of natural immunity right to the intervention, medical intervention approach. Were you discussing this with other doctors? Were you finding there was a little bit of a bridge between that conventional medical route and those who had taken a naturopathic education path?
To be honest, it seems like the corruption or brainwashing or whatever the word is, was just as vast in the naturopathic community and profession
Mhm.
as in the conventional. And I don't know if it was just the fear that turned off people's brain, because you hear that as well, like, oh, if
Mhm.
you're in fear, like your brain doesn't work. And it's like, oh man, I guess a lot of people are in fear because a lot of people's brains are not working.
Yeah,
So I
yeah,
don't know if it was that, or if it was the conscious fear of having strikes made against one's medical license, because there was of course a lot of threats around that. In fact, for myself, right around all the years kind of blend together, but right around the distribution of the first round of the vaccine, I was sharing a lot of information like around natural immunity. And I remember like the hashtag natural immunity was blocked and stuff like that. And
yeah.
I was sharing a lot on Instagram. And I received a letter from the Colorado board of the regulatory board saying that there were a number of anonymous complaints made against me and that my license was at risk of being revoked. And so I took that seriously. I definitely was like, I shut up for a little bit. I became censored. I self-censored as a result of that. And I think that a lot of people were in that position of just, even if they were courageous and had the clear thinking, they were self-censoring because there was such a huge
Mhm.
kind of force that they were up against. So yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that but to answer your question, I for sure was trying to have these, commenting on people's social media posts like, hey, what about natural immunity? And there's like, oh, this guy, oh my gosh, he must vote for Trump, or like, all this sort of things that just like it just got hysterical real quick. And that's when I kind of reeled things in and just kind of self-censored a little bit more, unfortunately.
No worry, understood. Well, I appreciate your honesty on
Yeah.
the time and the matter, though. It really it is appreciated, and it's nice. I think a big path forward here is humility, and one I'm trying to practice a lot more too, and admitting of where things could have gone better, or where they did, and so it helps to kind of ease the discussion field, if you will. That's maybe not the best analogy, but also I just wanted to pick your mind on one of our last kind of topics here, just be the amount of the conflict of interest. It must be very challenging as a doctor to see, at least for, I mean, so much money has gone into the advertisement world around pharmaceutical products, and a pill for a solution has really been reinforced there. Do you see that this is a major problem we're going to have to, as a society, approach and overcome? And perhaps is there a way of actually doing this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's hugely problematic, just as much in the alternative natural realm as it is in the conventional, I think. And I'm talking about supplements. The supplement
Mm,
industry is
mm,
just as huge and frankly almost just as corrupt. Well, it's not just as huge and it's not just as corrupt, but it's a problem,
mm,
compared to the pharmaceutical company. Um, and yeah, there are huge conflicts of interest that I think everyone kind of understands. Like everyone knows that the pharmaceutical companies control everything, control the narrative, control what's on the news, control what's on social media
mhm,
platforms. Like everyone kind of knows that, but everyone doesn't realize the implications of that,
mhm,
the
mhm.
and I guess I can share when I was in naturopathic school, our school received a grant from the state. I don't know how much money, $1 million, couple $1 million, even if it was 100,000 or 5,000, like a grant. They received money that was contingent on the administration of vaccines in the community clinics in Oregon. So there's all these kind of just like
Mhm,
bribery, and it's not even, that's just like, it's not like that's just normal. It's
mhm.
not like, oh my gosh, oh wow, the pharmaceutical company
Yeah.
corrupted the naturopathic school. It's like that's just kind of like people think like, oh yeah, they got a grant from the state, and oh yeah, they get just gotta administer these vaccines in community clinics. But if you think about just the implications of that and how
Yeah.
that then controls what students are learning and how they're thinking about health and disease, and of course, we know, in the conventional model, if people are interested in researching the Flexner report and how the Rockefellers kind of
Yes.
corrupted the medical education system and controlled it to be controlled and manipulated and ultimately corrupted by the pharmaceutical companies that really dictates what people are learning in school and then practicing and just the worldview in which they live. So it's a huge problem. And I think your question was also like, what do we do about this and how can we escape from that?
Yes.
And I don't know, but I do know that the only hope is to gain collective awareness of the enormity of the problem in which we
Mhm,
live.
mhm,
And that's not by just like, oh yeah, kind of dismissing it. And oh yeah, it's actually like having these conversations, is actually talking about um, this level of corruption. And I think most importantly, the biggest thing that we can do is not be clients and customers of the pharmaceutical company. In other words, take our health into our own hands. Personally, of course, I don't take any pharmaceutical products. um, I'm not like totally anti-pharma. There's places for it. But if everybody took their health into their own hands and everyone created natural health and robust health through lifestyle, nutrition, and so forth, then the pharmaceutical companies wouldn't have a role in our world. They would go bankrupt slowly. They wouldn't be selling their products. So we need to stop buying their products. And of course, I'm not talking about people with, type 1 diabetes that need insulin. There's like some things that there's just no way around it. But the fact of the matter is that I don't know what the statistics are, but I think it's like the average adult takes 5 pharmaceutical products, at least in the United States. You guys are probably a little bit better in Canada, but it's dire straits.
mhm.
Yeah, I think we need to take our health into our own hands, and that's the only hope for humanity.
Yeah. Well, so well said, Doctor. That was I I was going to ask some questions, and they would kind of just be, I'm sure, reiterating very similar answers, and directed in that sense of understanding what do we do here is in the future, and really coming back to some understanding our own health, starting with our own health, our own well-being, and this is you as you just described, going through with grants, and it's kind of a minefield out there in some sense, and you got to be conscientious and aware, and to be so, it sounds like you really need to be taking your health and your mental wellness very seriously. And so It's been so wonderful to have you on, Doctor. I'm so appreciative of your time, and it's been a wonderful conversation, and it's given me a lot to think about, and I'm sure our viewers will really appreciate it. So thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah. Thanks again for your time. Thanks for having this conversation and sharing it with the world.
Thank you.